Cool, thanks. So the data that you all are going to be inheriting for this project is not unfamiliar to you all. It is data that is from Little SD Shop. So you all have worked with merchants, items, customers, invoices, transactions, like you have seen this data before. And I'll be honest and say that like I haven't ever worked in Mod 2 when Little SD Shop was a project. So I don't necessarily know to what degree you all have gotten into that data, but I do know that like this is where that came from for your project in Mod 2. So essentially what you all are going to be working on, it says up here just for the project description. Let me read through this. So imagine you're working for a company developing an e-commerce application. Your team's working in a service-oriented architecture, meaning the front and back ends of this application are separate. They're separate applications and they communicate via APIs. Your job is to expose the data that powers the site through an API that the front end will consume. So I think that this description might be a little misleading. Y'all are not responsible for creating a front end. This application or this project that y'all are currently going to be working on is truly just exposing an API with the idea that, okay, a front end somewhere down the line, there's an e-commerce application front end that wants to consume the API that I build. So the specs and what we're asking of you to create is with that front end application in mind and how they are consuming that API. So just working on the back end, we'll get more into like service-oriented architecture where you all build out the front end and the back end applications in the consultancy project. But for just this project, y'all are focusing on the back end. Learning goals, taking a look at these 3 stars. So for the 3 stars, student should have a functional understanding of the concept. So this is where your main learning goals are for this project. Exposing an API. Y'all had a lesson with Brian on building an API, so you can come back to that if you have questions or just want to review that before getting started on this. Use serializers to format JSON responses, and also testing the build of your API, test API exposure. So those are the main learning goals here. The other ones, compose advanced active record queries to analyze information stored in your SQL database. This project is kind of broken up into 3 different sections. Y'all will see if you haven't already. And I would say the 3rd section is where there's some advanced business logic queries that you'll need to do. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. And again, kind of similar to the last point, write basic SQL statements without the assistance of an ORM, without the assistance of Active Record. All right. Let's see. What else do I want to take a look at on this page? Okay, yeah. As far as project management goes, what this chunk is saying here, I kind of mentioned that there are 3 sections to this project. And I think the sections kind of go in order of difficulty, ending with the 3rd section being pretty business logic heavy. This project, I think, can get a little bit repetitive, but I kind of like that in that it kind of brings home this process of building and exposing an API. What we would suggest as far as project management goes, I think that it's easy to, like, since there are 3 sections here, and like I said, it kind of does go in order of easy to difficult. A lot of students will start out and like get all of the easy ones done and like go endpoint to endpoint and go like all of them through section 1, all of them through section 2, and then start on section 3 and finish that up. I would suggest, since section 3 is like pretty chunky with that business logic, that you all take time to kind of like separate out which sections you work on throughout the week that you have to work on this project. So maybe don't work through all of section 1 and then section 2, maybe work through half of section 1 and then take a look at section 2 and then add one endpoint in from section 3. So kind of jumping around to the different sections just to make sure that y'all are getting exposure to these learning goals. If it does take you a little bit longer to like get into a groove with building this API and you don't get to section 3, then you would lose out on this learning goal of advanced active record queries. And so that's kind of what we want to avoid here. Like if it takes you a little bit longer to get into that rhythm, we still want to make sure, like, even if you're not able to finish the project, we still want to make sure that you're exposed to these learning goals. So jump around through sections 1, 2, and 3. Again, we'll see those in a little bit. In the past, we used to have just like an RSpec suite that we would run against your project, and y'all would be able to use it as well. You are still responsible, and you are still responsible for building your own tests. What we have changed recently is that instead of using RSpec for you all to run or test out your application against our test, we actually created a bunch of Postman tests for y'all, or Postman endpoints for y'all. And so this section here, where it starts with Postman, is going through instructions on how to get the suite set up. So what you'll see, I went ahead and I downloaded this already using all of the instructions here. And each of these links, you're going to download these test suites and save them and import them into your Postman application. When you do that, you'll get those suites over here on the left within your collections. And just opening these up, you can see like we have a lot of different endpoints that you all can go ahead and just run each of them individually if you would like, or you can also go ahead and run them as a whole. One thing to note here with these tests, and this might make a little bit more sense as we go through project requirements, in some of these sections, you're not required to do all of the endpoints. For example, in section 3, in part 3, there are, I think, 7 endpoints that we give you an option of creating, but we only require that you complete 4 of them. So there are a lot of endpoints here for all of the possible endpoints that you all could create for this project. So I say that because not every single one of these Postman requests need to pass all these tests. They don't need to pass because you're not required to get all of these endpoints created. So I think it makes a little bit more sense to run them individually. When they do run individually, there are tests within each individual request. You can take a look at the code that we have for those tests. After you run this, it'll come up as like, I think we have it marked in. Yeah. After you run like an individual test, it'll show you what your test results are. So for example, if it says 7 out of 7, for that endpoint, there were 7 tests. If you got 7 out of 7, it means that all of those tests passed for that one endpoint. If you got 3 out of 7, 3 tests passed, 4 did not. And the other thing that I'll add into that is let's see if I think it's written in here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. Some of the endpoints include edge case testing, and you can keep that as kind of some extension work. So for example, if you are working in part 1, I don't know if I have an example off the top of my head, but within some of these tests, there are some edge case testing. And you'll notice that when you get like the test suite back saying which ones passed, which ones did not. And if it was an edge case that did not pass, you're welcome to kind of save that for an extension later. So some of that like edge case testing is grouped into one endpoints tests. Joe?
Yeah, apologies. Just to clarify, so like Rails Engine Part 1, like that's a collection, not an endpoint, correct? Because when I click on the link for Rails Engine Part 1, it's a JSON. So is like 1a.merchants, is that like an endpoint that we're calling from within that JSON response, like the larger parent one, or I'm a little confused?
Yeah, the endpoints are grouped based off of the resource that they are building. So these are for, and I think that this might make a little bit more sense when we get into the requirements, Joe. But for part 1, there are, how many is this? Looks like 10, but I think some of these are extra tests. Hold on one second. Yeah, we'll kind of get into this a little bit when we get to the technical requirements of this. But when you hop into like these subfolders, that's where you'll see those actual requests or those endpoints that we want you to create. And the JSON that you get just by clicking on the link there, when you download that and save it and then import it into Postman, it'll create these subfolders for you. Lawrence?
So are we not using, we're using RSpec for everything but the endpoint testing, or is this going to be all the testing we employ?
This is kind of a source of truth for y'all. We still want you to write tests for your application for the API that you're building. And you should still be using SimpleCov to check the coverage report of your tests against the code that you write. What we have here is kind of an additional way for you to test your code, but it should not replace your own tests that you're going to be writing using RSpec. It's just there to help you out. And if you have something passing in your RSpec on the test that you create, but it's not passing in the Postman suite, then I feel very confident saying, just because we've tested this quite a bit, that I would check your application and the way that you've written your test to make sure that it is truly working the way that you want it to. Because like I said, we want you to kind of have this as a resource to use as like a source of truth. Does that make sense, Lawrence?
Completely.
Cool.
So it's like a less annoying version of, what was that called? Never mind. Sorry, word's gone.
Okay. All right. Any other questions about the Postman resources that we have for y'all? Molly?
Just confirming, is that like something that you would do, like download right at the beginning and start using like really early on, or okay, yeah.
Yeah, I would. And I would get this set up right away. Get all of these endpoints tests implemented into Postman. I would still go the route of TDDing your project, your application, but I would say like the way that I would use this is get the endpoint to work locally against my tests, and then spin up my server. The way that this is going to work, just like it does when you're using Postman right now, spin up your server, and then you can go ahead in here and run each of these endpoints that you created and make sure that that's passing there. Lee?
And so that's how Postman is going to speak to our like localhost 3000. And so that's how it's going to check it.
Yes. So with all of these endpoints here, you can see that the route that it's calling to is using localhost. So as long as you have you've like run Rails-S, your server is running, it'll be able to connect to it. Thanks. All right, let's go ahead. Let's jump into technical requirements. The first part of this page for Rails engine requirements talks about what I mentioned in the beginning of this hour of how in the past, we used to have you all create your own rake task and pull in this data. Now we have that data for you. So let me run through this just to make sure that I'm not skipping out on anything. Set up for your application. When you are setting up your application, make sure that you are, well, you don't have to call it this, but if you don't want to have to make additional adjustments to the commands down here, then I would make sure that you locally name your application Rails-engine. If you happen to have already created this and it's not called Rails-engine, then what you'll have to do is anywhere that we have these code snippets that are using Rails-engine, just make sure that you replace that with what you named your local application. When you are creating that Rails API, make sure that you're also using the API flag that's specific for an API application. If you have any questions on that, you can also take a look back at the lesson plan for building an API that talks about using that API flag to be able to create that application, that Rails application for you. You're going to be using SimpleCov. You all have used that before, so make sure that that gets implemented and put into your Rails helper. And then the next part, step 3 here, is getting your seeds set up. And so this walks through pretty much all of the setup that you all need for this. So grab this code, put it into your seeds file, and download the PG dump that we have here. And this is where all of that data is going to come from. So if you were to look at this, it's a binary file, I believe. It's pretty large. So it might not make sense when you're just looking at it, but download it, go ahead and get it into your database, create this data folder, and then drop it into your data folder there. Alex, question?
Yeah, is there some good troubleshooting resources? Because I've like tried this and then deleted the file and tried it with the name that was exact, because of course that was the first thing that I screwed up. And then it just says PG restore error, could not read file input, read from file input file. And I've like deleted, restarted, re-downloaded, moved things around. Like I just have no idea what I could be doing wrong.
Yeah, I saw that you put something into the code help channel. Was that the same problem that you put in there? Okay.
Yeah, after that, I just deleted it and restarted it because somebody suggested that maybe I missed a step, which is very plausible. But I just did everything again this morning and it's still happening.
Okay, I'll follow up. I haven't read through the thread there, but I did see that you asked a question in the code help. So let me follow up there with you on that. Is there anyone else that tried doing this that ran into a similar issue, similar error as Alex? Noah?
I didn't quite run into, so I've had to download some binary viewers and editors in order to see what's going on with the thing. Do you need a binary file viewer in your code editor for this to work, or can it work without you being able to see it work?
You shouldn't need to download anything to be able to view it. It should work without it. You were not able to get it working though.
I've been able to view it. I haven't gotten to the point where I'm running it and seeing whether I get an error.
Okay, let me follow up with you and Alex on that. Joe, did you have something?
Yeah, the same error as Noah, where it's wanting me to download something to view it, and when I try and just drag and drop it into that data folder, it's not working.
Brian, I see you're on the call. Have you run into this before?
I'm looking through Alex's post in the code help channel right now. That's what you're referring to?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I've run into this before, but I'll keep looking.
Okay. Yeah, let's plan on that. So I have Noah, Alex, and Joe. Y'all have run into something similar. We'll follow up in the code help channel, take a look at it, and then see if we can bounce some ideas off of y'all and see if we can figure that out. Thanks for bringing that up. All right. Yes, and so ideally, once you all get that into your data folder, drop that into there. Once you create your database, migrate it and seed it, and then also dump the data into the schema, steps 5 and 6, then y'all should be able to, after creating a class for something like customer, since that is one of the tables that y'all should inherit from this, should get dumped into your schema. Once you create that, you should be able to jump into Rails-C and pull out objects from your database. So I think this kind of runs through just a way to test it. You also, if you're using Postigo, you can also pull that up and make sure that you have all the tables that are listed here for that application with data in them. Any other questions? Again, we'll follow up with those issues that some of y'all are having. Any other questions regarding just setup of this project? Travis is not a requirement of this project. If I would say, like, if y'all want to work on it, on this project and implement it, you're more than welcome to, but it is not necessary. All right. Going on to API endpoints. Oh yeah, Molly.
Yeah, you might have I think you said something kind of about this earlier, just to clarify though, we're not making a front end. So are we supposed to deploy this somewhere? And like, I guess, I'm just curious about like, also like what we're then kind of putting out as an end product.
Yeah, you are not creating a front end. Let me actually, I don't think that we ever put in, hold on. Evaluation. Yeah, I don't think we ever put this on either. Deploying this to Heroku, having this in production is also not a requirement of this project. You are more than welcome to, and really what that will do is just have a place, like a actual application that you can use to call to get that API information, but it is not a requirement to have this in production for this project.
Okay, cool.
All right, Lawrence.
Sorry, I tried to share instead of unmute. Is there any chance we could call these like dragons or hippopotamuses or anything besides more merchants?
You know, I'm sorry, you cannot. Y'all are going to be, once y'all get jobs, you're going to be working on a very specific set of data for a very long time. So this is not unheard of to hear the same words over and over. Mark.
Should we be using a specific Rails? I think in the past we've used like 525, but if we don't put that in, then we'll use like 6 something.
Yeah, I would specify 525, 526 when you are creating that Rails new.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so for these 3 sections, actually, I guess before jumping into those 3 sections, so taking a look at this part after setup here. So you are going to be exposing API endpoints, and then listed here are kind of like some requirements that we are asking from y'all. So all endpoints should be fully tested for happy and sad paths. Again, the Postman tests are not a substitute for writing your own tests. All endpoints will expect to return JSON data. You should have all of your endpoints namespaced under version 1, API version 1. If you have any questions on like convention around JSON, you can take a look at the link that we have here on this 4th bullet point. And then these last 2 are talking about, so you will have, we are working with resources from your database, and it is possible to have some endpoints that are not RESTful convention, and that would be okay. If y'all like, we would like to see y'all try to get some RESTful convention into this, but there are times where it won't necessarily be RESTful or need to be RESTful, and if that's the case, it's okay to build those routes. Taya?
Are we going to be using FastJSON?
You can, yeah. Yep, you can go ahead. You can use that gem if you would like. Jen.
Can you explain in 30 seconds what FastJSON is?
Yeah, and I'll let you kind of take a look into that. I don't know if I wasn't sitting in on Brian's class when building the API. can I see like head shakes, yes or no? Did y'all talk about the FastJSON gem? Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna let y'all take a look at that. Really what it does is it kind of helps streamline serializing your data. So taking it from one form into another. So from an object into JSON. So you can take a look at that gem and it kind of takes out the hand rolling of converting a Ruby object into JSON.
Okay, cool. I just forgot. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Just to kind of connect it back, what we did talk about in class was, what if we want to send back different JSON responses? Like, what if we don't want all of the merchant objects? And I said, that's part of the customizing JSON class next week. And FastJSON is a part of it.
Yes. Yeah. And you will have, I think we are having a guest speaker for that class. You will find out later who it is. All right. So let's take a look into kind of these three sections. I mentioned before that we'd really like for y'all to kind of not spend all of your time in one spot. And so idea behind that again is jumping between the three sections, making sure that you are hitting all of the learning goals so that if the end of the week comes and you weren't able to complete the whole project, you didn't sacrifice business intelligence endpoints and learning from that. So section 1, RESTful endpoints. We can take a look here. This is mostly just like, think of this as index and show. So like showing all of the merchants, showing all items, getting one item, getting one merchant. So if you take a look here at these endpoints, so get all merchants, maximum of 20 at a time. There will be, when we take a look at that endpoint, you can see there's an option for, there should be a parameter for pagination. Get one merchant, get all items for a given merchant ID. Similarly with items, get all items, get one item, and then we have some CRUD functionality here with items that we want you to build out endpoints for. So create an item, edit an item, delete an item, and then similar to this last one with the merchants, get the merchant data for a given item ID. Section 2, you'll notice in section 2 that there are 4 endpoints listed, but we only expect you to do 2 of them. So we can kind of think of them as 2 different sections. And so it's kind of listed out here. Find one merchant based on search criteria and find all of the items based on search criteria. Or you can do this one, find one item based off of search criteria and find all merchants based on search criteria. So you have an option on which one you want to do, but we're only expecting you to do 2 endpoints out of the 4 that are in section 2. In section 3, there are, 7 endpoints, and we're only asking that you choose 4 of them to do. These are the business intelligence endpoints. Yeah, and you can kind of see minimum requirements here. 9 endpoints from section 1, 2 endpoints from section 2, 4 endpoints from section 3. Following this, so in part 3 here, this is going to start getting into more details for each individual endpoint. So this is where y'all are going to be spending a lot of your time in section 3, just taking a look at what endpoint is expecting to, or what data that endpoint is expecting to send back. And so taking a look at each of these individual endpoints, let me find an example here. So this is the first one. Fetch a single record. So this endpoint for items and merchants. So this is directions for kind of like 2 of them. Should render JSON representation of the corresponding record if found. And you're following this pattern. So it tells you what your endpoint should look like. And then it also shows you an example of what your JSON should send back. Alex?
I know that you mentioned like maybe starting in 1, bouncing around. Would you advise against starting in section 3? Like maybe we should get our, dip our toes in section 1 before going straight to advanced active record stuff.
Totally. Yeah, I think, and I'd be curious, Brian, to hear like what you would suggest on this. I think with section 1, section 1 helps. Let me pull up the list again. I mentioned that like, this is a nice project in that like, there's a lot of repetition in here. So I think with section 1, it's all basic CRUD functionality that you all have had experience with. You understand what it means to like get all of one resource, show just one, create a resource, update a resource. And so I think that like, if you can complete most of 1 and maybe like 1 endpoint in 2, then I would say start jumping to 3. But I don't want you all to think that like everything in 1, everything in 2 needs to be complete before you jump to 3. But yeah, Alex, I would agree. I think that jumping straight to section 3 would probably be quite a lot. Lee?
Do we need to match up anything that we're choosing? So like if in section 2, we do that first bullet point, when we go to section 3, do we need to try and match the things that we're choosing to? Like,
no. Yeah, there really aren't any, not that I can think of at the moment. I don't think there are any dependencies on like, if you do this section in section 2, then you can only do these 4 in section 3. There's no dependencies that I can think of there. Good question. Yeah, so I mean, pretty much going forward in this section 3, what y'all can like kind of read through this and like take a look through is it tells you like which endpoint that it's describing, what it's expecting to get passed, and also what it's expecting to then render. So a lot of information here, super long, but it goes into more details for each individual section and what you're expecting to get sent back. What questions do y'all have? I don't know that I necessarily want to go through every single one of these descriptions here, other than just letting y'all know that this is where you can find like more descriptions on what needs to be passed along with the requests and what you should expect your response to look like. Brian, do you have anything to add as far as technical requirements go?
Nothing on the technical side.
Okay.
I have other thoughts though, if you want to hear them.
Yeah, I would love to hear them.
I think a big part of this project is project management. So for if last mod you during the solo project you found like maybe you didn't get as far as you had hoped, I would especially like, I think this applies for everybody, but especially like I would want everybody to reflect on their solo projects from last mod and really like be very intentional about this project, starting with like this afternoon. I think in the beginning it talks about make sure you're planning and building in a little bit of wiggle room if something takes longer. And I would just like really encourage you all to take that strategy. Don't just take this project and say, oh, big chunk of work, I'm just going to work until it's done. Like really try to be intentional with your time.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think the other piece of this that I just wanted to go over before sending y'all off, I'm going to let you all, if you get to the extensions, you can take a look at that on your own. But I want to take a look at this evaluation portion. I know I mentioned, and I just updated this morning, so I hope that everything is here that I added. Yeah, okay. I know that I mentioned, and I think Brian probably did in some of his evals as well, that we really want you all to come prepared to these evals. Last inning, we tried kind of like bringing that idea home and like implementing that by having students create a video with their presentation. That got to be quite a bit for instructors to just like go through everyone's videos and grade based off of that and then follow up with feedback. So we changed it to is instead of creating a video, we have like a very specific, very well outlined expectation for what y'all should come prepared with for these evals. We will still be doing group evals next Friday. But what we want y'all to come prepared with is 10-minute presentation where you all are making sure that you are hitting every point, every like little checkbox area from this presentation point. This is set up like the way that we have outlined this and added these bullet points with questions, like leading questions for y'all. This is set up such that if you were to answer all of these questions underneath these checkboxes, then you've essentially like shown us those portions of the rubric. So we want you to use this like presentation checkbox as a way to like ensure that you are showing us what we would like to see in order to score your project based off of the requirements that we have set in the rubric. So these are, again, kind of like guiding questions for y'all. And what I will add to that is please practice your presentation. It's tough when students come to a presentation and it's obvious to us that they have not practiced or even looked over the presentation points. So this is your heads up. We are expecting y'all to come prepared, and so much so that it is a part of your rubric. So we will be grading you on your presentation. You can expect to get specific feedback on your technical language as well. And the reason why we're like emphasizing this so much is because, hold on, computer's gonna die. Is because we want y'all to get practice with explaining your code and using technical language. And we feel like in order to do that, sometimes it has to come from us putting an emphasis on that area of your presentation as well. So come prepared, talk through it, maybe record yourself doing it so you can play it back and hear it, and make sure that you have gone through all of the requirements of the presentation points above. Any questions on eval, presentation, rubric? Richard.
So it's just a presentation for you all. We don't have to record and give that recording to you.
You do not need to record, but what I will say is if that's easier for you to practice this, record it, and then come the evaluation, show us the recording in that session, I'm okay with that. Brian, how do you feel about that?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I think that still gives you that practice of going through your code, hitting the points that we ask of you, and using technical language. So if that's something that you all would like to do, present it ahead of time, record it, and then come evaluation time, share your screen and show us the video, that's okay with me. All right, Brian, anything to add?
Not from me.
Okay, let's do this then. This is for the next, until 11, we have this class, this kickoff. So let's go ahead. Y'all can turn your cameras off. Let's hop off the call if you would like, but I will stay on until 11. And if y'all have any questions that you want to come back in and ask, then come on back in at any point, or you can stay on if you have questions that pop up between now and 11 Mountain Time, and I can definitely talk through and answer any questions that pop up. But let's say for the next 20 minutes, I guess, take a look over the spec for the project and the requirements for the project, and note any questions that you might have. And if at any point you do have questions, hop back on this call. I'll keep recording, and you can pop back in and ask any questions that you have. How's that sound?
Meg, could you make a couple breakout rooms like
Yeah.
with the like participants assign themselves?
Oh yeah, let's do that.
And then
Go ahead.
Alex, if you want to jump into the first room with me and we can look at your issue.
I think I might have gotten it working. I was just checking it really quickly and maybe it was something stupid, but I can still pop over there and let you know what I did.
Yeah, let's do that if
Okay.
you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Room 1.
Emmy?
I see that our project check-ins are on Tuesday, and I was wondering what a safe spot might be to get to by then.
Yeah, good question. Let me take a look at some past humans that did this project and see where they were at that point and how they finished. Okay, looking through just my experience with the last cohort to give you an idea, it looks like the students that were able to finish everything, so like a score of 3 or above, at their first check-in, looking through all of them, those students were mostly complete with section 1. Some of them have dabbled in section 2. So I would say kind of like looking at this as a resource of like who was able to finish the whole project and at what point were they all at that first check-in. I think going with that idea of like maybe not getting through all of section 1 and all of section 2 before getting to 3, I think that it would be safe to say like maybe half of section 1 and section 2 done, or section 2 started. Half of section 1 with some of section 2 started.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Yeah. I am also seeing, like, just looking through this, like there were people that were able to complete the project that didn't have all of, or like most of section 1 done at that first check-in. I think I always hesitate saying like where I'd expect y'all to be, just because sometimes that like learning curve is different for everyone, where it like might take a little bit longer to really understand what you're building out, but once it clicks, it comes really quickly. So that's kind of why I think like also Brian mentioned like come up with a plan for yourself. And I understand it's kind of hard to when you don't exactly know how long this will take, but I think also knowing yourself and how like you process getting new content, new information, and what your learning curve has looked like in the past, what your expectation for yourself is might be different than what someone else's is. So I do sometimes hesitate giving you like goals to hit because it could be different for someone else, but hopefully that gives you an idea.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that does. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.